The ash ravens did not eat Liora Sable when the Dragon King sent her into their tower. They brought her his mother's crown. For one impossible breath, the whole courtyard of Veyr stood silent beneath the storm-dark sky. Above them, inside the broken black tower where condemned prisoners were sent to disappear, a silent maid stood barefoot among hundreds of cursed ravens. Their feathers glowed with ember-gray light. Their eyes burned like coals under ash. Their wings beat around her without touching her skin. And at her feet lay a crown no one in the Dragon Kingdom was allowed to name. The burned crown of Queen Maelyra Veyr. Dragon King Caelan Veyr stared up from the courtyard below, his black cloak whipping behind him in the rain, his face stripped of every royal mask. Not anger, not triumph. Shock, grief, recognition. A moment earlier, the court had called Liora useless. A voiceless thing. A lower hall maid who could polish dragonbone stairs but could not defend her own name. That had always been the first cruelty. Not the silence itself. What others did with it. Liora had not been born unable to hear. She heard everything. She heard kitchen doors locking from the outside. She heard nobles lowering their voices when she entered, because they believed silence meant stupidity. She heard servants whisper that her tongue had been taken by the old gods. Though no one had ever asked her whether she remembered losing it, she remembered. Not the blade, not the blood, only a room full of black feathers, only a woman's hand pressing something warm into her palm, only ravens screaming while her own voice vanished into their throats. After that, she learned to survive by becoming useful enough to ignore. And the ash ravens watched her. From rooflines, from broken statues, from the sealed tower no servant was supposed to approach. They watched as if they knew where her voice had gone. That was why High Memory Counselor Varric Thorn smiled when the guards dragged her before the Dragon King. The accusation had begun in the royal archive before sunset. A memory casket had been found open. Inside it, a strip of burned black silk lay where a royal confession should have been preserved. Varric held the empty casket before the court with both gloved hands. This maid was found in the archive corridor, he said. Near the Queen's forbidden shelves. A murmur moved through the nobles. Queen Maelyra's shelves. Even saying the dead queen's name made people look toward the Dragon King. Caelan sat on the obsidian throne beneath banners of black dragonhide, one hand closed around the armrest, his golden eyes fixed on Liora. Not her face. Her hands. Liora looked down. Ash stained her fingers. It always did. Varric lifted the burned silk. The stolen memory concerns the queen's final night. A voiceless maid is a convenient thief. She cannot confess. She cannot deny. She cannot speak the names of those who helped her. The court accepted the story too quickly. Silent girls made useful criminals. Servants with no family crest made easy offerings. A maid who could not defend herself could be turned into any shape the powerful required. Liora lifted her hands to sign. I did not steal it. Before she could finish, Varric struck her wrists with his silver archive rod. Pain flashed up her arms. Her fingers froze. Do not perform innocence at the throne, he said. The humiliation moved through the hall like soft laughter. Liora did not cry. Crying made people feel merciful after they finished being cruel. She looked at Caelan. 3 nights earlier, the Dragon King had found her in the lower corridor outside the Raven Tower after midnight. She had been standing beneath the sealed stairs with a bowl of raw meat in her hands. Though no one had ordered her to feed anything there. The ravens had been screaming. Not outside. Inside her head. Caelan had stepped from the darkness in black armor, tall and terrifying, his dark hair unbound, his eyes burning gold. Instead of demanding why she was there, he had spoken one word. Liora. She had never told him her name. No one important knew servant names unless they wanted something from them. He had looked past her toward the sealed tower door and said quietly, If the ravens call you again, do not answer alone. She had not understood. Tonight, she did. Too late. Varric turned toward the throne. Your Majesty, the old punishment remains. Any servant caught near Queen, memory may be sent to feed the ash ravens. Ah! A hush fell. The ash raven tower rose beyond the western courtyard, narrow and black, its windows broken like eye sockets. Prisoners sent inside were never seen again. The court claimed the ravens picked clean those who carried treason in their bones. But Liora had scrubbed the lower steps near that tower. She knew what the court did not say. The ravens did not eat everyone. Sometimes, they kept what mattered. Caelan stood. The hall lowered its head. For one wild breath, Liora thought he would refuse. His eyes moved to her bruised wrists, then to Veyric's archive rod, then to the empty memory casket. Something cold and furious passed over his face so quickly the court might have missed it. Liora did not. Veyric's voice softened. Majesty? Caelan looked at Liora. His expression became unreadable again. Royal. Cruel, if one did not know how to hear the silence under it. Send her to the Ash Raven Tower, he said. The words cut through her more cleanly than Veyric's rod. Liora stared at him. The ravens had screamed her name in his presence. He knew something. He had warned her. And still he sent her. The guards seized her arms. She did not fight. A silent maid who fought looked guilty. A silent maid who begged with her hands gave the court a spectacle. So Liora kept her spine straight as they dragged her through the rain. The courtyard waited outside, filled with nobles under black canopies, soldiers with dragon-scale shields, servants watching from the lower arches. Above them, the Ash Raven Tower leaned into the storm. At its base, Caelan stopped her. Only close enough that the court could not hear him. His voice was low. They have been screaming your name for 6 nights. Leora's throat tightened around a sound she could not make. Her fingers moved before she could stop them. Then why send me in? Caelan's jaw clenched. Because Veyric planned to cut your hands before dawn. Her blood went cold. Her hands. Her only language. His eyes dropped to her fingers. In the tower, the ravens may answer before he can silence them. Liora almost laughed. No sound came. Of course. Another king's choice. Another wound dressed as strategy. Her hands moved slowly. And if they eat me? Pain crossed his face. Enough for her to see. Not enough to heal anything. Then I will have failed you. That was not comfort. It was not forgiveness. It was barely even mercy. The tower door opened. A smell of ash, old feathers, and burned rain rolled out. The guards shoved Liora inside. The door slammed shut behind her. Darkness swallowed the courtyard. For a moment there was no sound. Then wings. Hundreds of them. Liora stood at the base of the tower stairs. Rain dripping from her hair. Wrists bruised. Heart hammering so hard it hurt. Above her, the ravens lined every beam, every broken stair, every cracked stone ledge. Black birds, cursed birds, memory birds. Their eyes glowed ember gray. They did not move toward the bowl of meat a guard had thrown at her feet. They looked at her mouth. Liora stepped back. The nearest raven opened its beak. A woman's voice came out. Not Leora's. Not yet. Late. Liora stopped breathing. Another raven spoke from the rafters. Too late. Then another. 6 nights late. The ravens began to descend. Liora stumbled against the tower wall, lifting her hands in warning, though no one there knew her signs. The ravens did. They froze. All of them. Their heads tilted in perfect unison. The largest raven dropped from the highest beam and landed on the floor before her. Its feathers were black at the roots and silver at the tips, as if ash had tried to become moonlight. It looked at her bruised wrists, then at her silent mouth. Then it bowed its head. Not to a queen, not to a servant, to a keeper. A memory struck Liora so hard she nearly fell. A woman kneeling in this same tower. A crown burning in her hands. Ravens circling. A child hidden beneath a black cloak. A voice being placed into feathers. The vision vanished. Liora pressed both hands to her throat. The ravens lifted into the air. They did not attack. They circled upward in a storm of black wings. The tower shook. Outside, the court began to murmur. Caelan's voice rang from beyond the door. Open it, Veyric answered, sharp and fearful. The punishment is not complete. The ravens screamed. This time, every scream carried a fragment of a woman's grief. The broken tower ceiling cracked wider. Moonlight poured in. The largest raven flew to the highest ledge and pulled something from a nest of ash and bone. A crown. Small. Burned. Blackened nearly beyond recognition. But one dragon wing curve still remained. One ruby still glowed like a heart that refused to die. The raven dropped it. Liora caught it without thinking. The crown burned cold in her hands. Outside, the tower door burst open. Caelan stood in the rain, sword drawn. Varric behind him with his face drained of color. The ravens surged around Liora but did not touch her. The burned crown lay in her palms. The largest raven landed on her shoulder and spoke in Queen Maelyra's voice. Keeper found. The courtyard went silent. Liora looked at Caelan. His face had gone white. Varric whispered, "Impossible." The ravens screamed again. This time, they screamed one name. Not Liora. Not yet. Maelyra. The burned crown split open in Leora's hands. Inside it, wrapped in black feathers, was a memory shard glowing gold. Caelan took one step forward. The ravens snapped their wings open, blocking him. The queen's voice came from every bird at once. Name the son who sent her. Queen Maelyra's memory did not show her death first. It showed the night Caelan learned to fear the ravens. The golden shard inside the burned crown split open in Leora's hands, and the ash raven tower vanished. Rain became smoke. Broken stone became a candlelit nursery with black silk curtains and a window barred in gold. A younger Caelan stood beside a carved cradle, no older than 12, his dark hair falling into his eyes, his small hands clenched around the edge of his nightrobe. Across from him, Queen Maelyra knelt on the floor with blood on one sleeve and a raven perched on her shoulder. Not a tame raven, an ash raven. Its ember eyes watched the boy like a judge. "Mother," young Caelan whispered. "Why are they screaming?" The nursery walls trembled with wings. Outside the window, hundreds of ravens circled the palace towers. But their cries did not sound like birds. They sounded like women trying to warn the dead. Queen Maelyra pressed one finger to her lips. Then she reached for a little girl hidden beneath the cradle. Liora stopped breathing. The child in the memory was small, trembling, wrapped in a servant's cloak too large for her shoulders. Dark hair stuck to her tear-wet cheeks. Her mouth was open in terror, but no sound came out. Liora knew that face. Not because mirrors had shown it to her. Because pain remembered itself. Young Caelan looked down at the hidden child. "Who is she?" Queen Maelyra's voice shook. "The keeper." The ash raven on her shoulder opened its beak. A child's voice came out. Liora's voice. Small, terrified, still alive. "They are coming." The memory broke with the force of a blade. Liora staggered back inside the raven tower. The burned crown clutched against her chest. Rain hammered through the cracked ceiling. Ravens whirled around her in a storm of ash and ember. Caelan stood in the open doorway below, sword in hand, staring at her as if the memory had torn something out of him and left it bleeding. Varric Thorn stood behind him, pale with fury. "Close the crown," Varric snapped. "That memory is corrupted." The ravens turned their ember eyes on him. Liora lifted one hand. Not to the ravens. To herself. Her fingers moved slowly, cutting through the air. "I was there." No one spoke. Then her second hand rose. "You saw me." Caelan's face tightened. "Yes," he said. The answer did not free him. It only opened the wound wider. Leora's hands shook, but she kept signing. "You knew my voice was inside them." Caelan took one step forward. The ravens snapped their wings open, blocking him from the stair. He stopped. Good. Some doors were not his to open anymore. "I remembered the child," he said, voice low. "I did not remember your name." Leora's mouth ached around all the words she could not say. Her hands answered for her. "Convenient," the ravens screamed. The largest raven on her shoulder spoke in Maelyra's voice. "Name the son who forgot because forgetting kept him crowned." Caelan went still. Varric's eyes flashed. "Your Majesty, do not answer." The burned crown pulsed in Leora's hands. Inside it, the golden shard widened again. This time the memory did not wait for permission. The tower dissolved. They saw Queen Maelyra running through the raven tower with the voiceless child in her arms. Blood stained the queen's gown. Behind her, Varric's younger face appeared in the doorway, calm and sharp beneath a black council hood. "She heard the confession," Varric said. "Give me the girl." Queen Maelyra backed toward the ravens. "She is a child. She is a witness." Young Caelan appeared at the stairs, frozen in terror. Varric looked at him. "Prince, your mother is sick with grief. Tell her to put the servant down." Caelan's younger mouth opened. He did not speak. Queen Maelyra looked at her son once. Just once. Not angry. Heartbroken. Then she pressed something warm into the child's palm. A black feather tipped in gold. Keep what they steal, she whispered. Varric lifted a silver blade. The ravens descended. The memory shattered into black wings. Liora fell to one knee, gasping without sound. The largest raven stayed on her shoulder. Talons light but steady. The feather. She remembered now. Not fully. Not gently. A warm shape in her fist. A queen's blood on her sleeve. Her own voice being pulled from her throat and scattered into birds before Varric's knife could cut it out. She had not been born voiceless. She had been hidden inside a silence someone else made useful. Varric moved. Fast. He snatched the silver archive rod from his sleeve and struck it against the tower floor. A ring of pale fire burst outward. The ravens screamed and slammed into the walls as if invisible chains had caught their wings. Liora lurched forward. Caelan's sword rose. Varric smiled. Careful, Majesty. The archive seal binds stolen memory. If you break it wrong, every voice kept in these birds burns with it. The ravens rilled in the pale fire. Liora felt the pain in her own throat. Not her body. Her missing voice. Caelan's eyes went molten gold. Release them. Varric laughed softly. You still think commands matter here. Then he looked up at Liora. The maid cannot speak. The birds cannot testify. The queen is dead. And you, Majesty, sent the keeper into the tower yourself. The words landed hard, because they were true enough to hurt. Caelan looked at Liora. No defense came. No royal explanation. Only shame. I did, he said. The ravens went quiet. Even Varric stilled. Caelan lowered his sword. I sent you in because I thought the ravens would protect the truth before Varric could cut your hands. His voice roughened. But I still sent you. Liora stared at him. Rain ran down his face like grief had learned another shape. I made your silence carry my mother's proof, he said, and I called it strategy. The burned crown in Leora's hands grew hot. Not painful. Awake. The largest raven leaned close to her ear. This time it did not speak in Maelyra's voice. It spoke in a voice that cracked through Liora like dawn through sealed stone. Her own. Take it back. Liora froze. The ravens began beating their wings against the archive fire, not fleeing it, striking it in rhythm. One beat. Then another. Then hundreds. A pulse. A language. Liora understood. The ravens had not kept her voice from her. They had kept it from the knife. Her hands closed around the burned crown. Varric's smile vanished. Do not. Liora stood. Her throat burned. Her scarless silence tore open inside her. She did not know if the sound would come as a word, a scream, or blood, but for the first time in years it would be hers. She looked at Caelan, then at Varric, then at the ravens bound in stolen memory. Her lips parted. One broken whisper left her mouth. Mine. The archive fire shattered. Every ash raven screamed with her voice at once. The tower shook. Varric stumbled back. Caelan dropped to one knee, not from pain, but because every raven in the tower turned toward Liora like a court finally recognizing its queen. The burned crown split wider in her hands. Inside the gold memory shard, Queen Maelyra's final confession began to form. Not in pictures. In words. And the first sentence burned across the air above Leora's head. My son did not kill me. Varric went white. Caelan stopped breathing. Leora's returned voice trembled in her throat. Raw, and new, and dangerous. The ravens waited. The crown waited. The kingdom waited. Then Queen Maelyra's second sentence began to burn. The man who stole the keeper's voice stole my death too. Queen Maelyra's confession turned every raven toward Varric Thorn. Varric ran before the second sentence finished burning. The man who stole the keeper's voice stole my death too. The words blazed above Leora's head in gold fire. The ravens struck Varric's shadow first. Hundreds of black wings swept downward, pinning his darkness to the tower floor. Something silver rose from that shadow. A knife, thin, curved, old. Liora knew it before memory fully returned. The blade that had waited near her throat. The blade Queen Maelyra had tried to keep away from her. Caelan saw it too. His face went white, then deadly. He lifted his sword and stepped toward Varric. Leora's returned voice tore from her throat. No. Caelan stopped. The word hurt her. It also belonged to her. She clutched the burned crown against her chest, surrounded by ravens and rain. Her voice shook, but held. Not yet. Veyr twisted beneath the ravens. A merciful maid. How touching. Liora looked down at him. Do not mistake witness for mercy. The ravens screamed once. The burned crown opened wider in her hands. Queen Maelyra's voice filled the tower. He took the keeper's voice to hide what the ravens heard. Gold fire wrapped around Veyric's shadow knife. He forged my son's guilt before my body cooled. Caelan froze. Above Liora, another sentence burned. The boy did not command my door sealed. Caelan's sword lowered. His mouth opened. But no words came. Liora saw the wound open inside him. A boy outside a locked door. A dead mother. A counselor whispering guilt into grief until the grief became memory. Liora turned back to Veyr. What did you make him remember? Her throat scraped with pain. Blood warmed the back of her tongue. Veyric's eyes filled with hatred. You should have stayed quiet. Liora stepped closer. I did. The words stopped the room. Years of silence lived inside them. I stayed quiet because you put my voice inside birds and called that protection. I stayed quiet while he sat on a throne built over a lie. Caelan flinched. Good. Truth had more than one edge. The crown flashed. A memory tore out of Veyric's shadow. Young Caelan stood outside a sealed chamber door. Blood ran beneath the crack. Veyr knelt beside him and whispered, You told the guards to keep the door closed, little prince. You were frightened. That is why she died alone. The memory shattered. Caelan stepped back as if struck. No, Veyr snarled. It kept the kingdom stable. Caelan's eyes burned gold. You made me think I killed her. I made you governable. The ravens erupted. Caelan lunget. His sword came down for Veyric's throat. Liora shouted again. No! The ravens surged between them. The blade stopped inches from black feathers. He does not get death before the confession finishes, Liora said. Caelan's hands shook around the sword. He put my mother's death in my hands. And he put my voice in theirs, Liora said, looking at the ravens. If we kill him now, he keeps the rest. For a terrible breath, Caelan looked ready to choose revenge. Then he lowered the sword. Not forgiveness. Control. Enough. Veyr reached for the silver archive rod at his belt. Before he could strike, the largest raven drove its beak into the rod's tip. The rod cracked. Black archive ink spilled across the floor, crawling toward the golden confession above Liora's head. My son did not. The letters flickered. Veyr smiled through blood. Memory does not need to burn to die. It only needs to be overwritten. Liora lifted the burned crown. Her voice came rough, new, and bleeding. Remember. The ravens froze. Not him, her. The crown split open. Queen Maelyra's final words entered Liora's throat, not stealing her voice. Standing beside it, Liora spoke, and the queen spoke with her. Veyr Thorn came to my chamber after midnight. The ink stopped. He carried the memory casket before I was dead. The ravens rose through the tower. He did not come to preserve my last confession. He came to choose which truth my son would inherit. Caelan closed his eyes. The queen's voice softened. My son was a child. Caelan broke. Not loudly. His sword simply fell from his hand. Then Maelyra's voice hardened. And this man made a crown out of his guilt. The archive rod shattered in Veyric's grip. The black ink dried into ash. The final sentence burned across the tower windows so the whole courtyard could see it. Caelan Veyr did not seal my door. Veyr collapsed. The ravens closed around him. Liora's throat bled, but her voice stayed hers. The largest raven opened its beak. This time another voice came out. A man's voice. Older. Royal. Commanding. Seal the queen's room. Leave the prince outside. Let him remember the door. Caelan lifted his head. Veyr began to shake. The burned crown opened one final layer. Inside the gold shard, a black command mark appeared. Not Veyric's. Not Caelan's. The ravens screamed a name Liora had never heard. But Caelan clearly had. King Orden. Caelan whispered. My father. Veyr tried to crawl away. The ravens seized his shadow and dragged it toward the stairs. Not away from judgment. Toward the place where the command had been buried. The burned crown turned in Liora's hands, pointing toward the sealed royal crypt beneath the palace. And every ash raven in Veyrhold began flying downward. Varric did not get to stay behind when the ravens flew toward the crypt. They dragged his shadow with them. Not his body. Not yet. His shadow stretched from his feet like black silk caught in hundreds of beaks, pulling him down the tower stairs while he clawed at the stone and screamed for the guards to stop them. No guard moved. The queen's confession still burned in the air above Leora's head. Caelan Veyr did not seal my door. And beneath it, darker and older, the ravens screamed the name that had cracked the Dragon King's face open. King Orden. Caelan stood slowly. The sword in his hand looked useless now. Not because it lacked edge. Because the enemy had become a memory buried beneath his own palace. Liora stepped after the ravens. The burned crown clutched against her chest. Her throat felt raw, as if the first word she had spoken had dragged glass behind it. When she swallowed, she tasted blood. Caelan saw it. His hand lifted once, then stopped. Good. He was learning. Can you walk? He asked. Liora looked at him. The question was almost right. Almost. She answered with the voice that had only just returned. Do not make my pain your permission. The words came out rough. Thin, but they came out. Caelan flinched, then bowed his head once. Then tell me what you need. Liora hated how much that mattered. She looked toward the stair, where Varric's shadow was being dragged downward by black wings while his body stumbled after it like a man chained to his own crime. Do not kill him. Caelan's jaw tightened. He helped bury my mother's death, and he knows where your father buried the command. The raven screamed once. Agreement, not obedience. Liora understood the difference now. The ash ravens were not soldiers. They would not kill because she ordered it. They answered truth. Only truth. If she tried to use them for revenge, they would turn on her silence too. She followed them down. The ash raven tower opened into a spiral stair that no one in the courtyard had seen from below. It should have led to the ground. Instead, it led under it. The burned crown grew colder in Leora's hands with every step. Caelan followed 3 steps behind her. Not beside her. Not touching her. Sword lowered. Varric stumbled ahead, dragged by his own shadow, face twisted with terror. You do not know what is sealed down there. Varric gasped. Leora's throat burned too much for a long answer, so she gave him one word. Truth. The ravens shrieked through the stair. The word echoed until the stone walls began to sweat gold memory. At the bottom, the passage opened into the royal crypt. Not the polished hall where dead kings were honored. The older crypt beneath it, a place of black dragonbone pillars, sealed coffins, and memory caskets stacked like skulls around a central tomb. The tomb of King Caelan Veyr. Caelan stopped at the threshold. For the first time since Liora had known him, the Dragon King looked young. Not weak. Young. A son standing before the father who had taught him grief wrong. The burned crown in Leora's hands pulsed. The ravens dropped Varric's shadow before Orden's tomb. Varric fell to his knees, panting. Do not open it, he whispered. Dead kings do not confess. They command. The crown answered before Liora could. Queen Maelyra's voice rose from the ruby at its center. Then let him command in front of witnesses. The tomb cracked. Not open. Awake. Black fire lit the carved dragon eyes along its lid. A voice came from inside. Cold. Royal. Familiar enough to make Caelan's face go bloodless. My son finally comes to the door. Liora felt the crown twist in her hands. Her throat tightened. If she spoke again, she could feel what it would cost. Blood. Memory. Maybe pieces of herself that had only just returned. Caelan saw the pain cross her face. He stepped forward, placing himself between Liora and the tomb. The ravens hissed. So did Liora. Not because he wanted to protect her. Because he still thought protection meant standing where truth needed to pass. Move, she whispered. Caelan closed his eyes once, then stepped aside. The tomb's black fire brightened. King Orden's voice filled the crypt. Good. Let the mute keeper speak for the dead queen. Let my son hide behind another woman's wound. Leora's hand tightened around the crown. The insult cut, but it did not own her. She lifted the burned crown toward the tomb. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I am not speaking for her. Blood warmed the back of her throat. I am asking what you buried. The ravens went silent. The crypt listened. Varric shook his head wildly. Do not answer. Your Majesty, do not. The ravens tore his shadow flat against the tomb. King Ordan laughed inside the stone. Then the black command mark from the crown burned across the tomb lid. The same mark hidden in Queen Maelyra's memory shard. The same mark that had taught Caelan to remember guilt as obedience. Leora's voice trembled. "Name the command." The tomb answered with King Ordan's voice. "Seal the queen's door. Leave the prince outside. Let him remember the door." Caelan staggered. Liora nearly dropped the crown. The ravens screamed, but they did not attack. Not yet. The tomb was not finished. King Ordan's voice softened, more dangerous than rage. She knew the ravens had chosen the child. She would have put royal memory into servant hands. She would have made the crown answer a silent girl. Caelan whispered, "So you killed her." The tomb went quiet. Then the dead king laughed. "No, son. I taught the kingdom to believe you did." The burned crown split fully open in Leora's hands. Inside it, Queen Maelyra's final memory rose like gold flame. Not a long vision, a single image. Maelyra placing her crown into the ash raven's keeping while Varric held Liora down and Ordan sealed the door. The queen looked not at Ordan, not at Varric, at young Caelan outside the bars. Her lips moved. The ravens carried the words into the crypt. "My son, this was never yours to carry." Caelan broke. Not loudly. No kingly scream. He simply dropped to one knee, as if the sentence had cut the bones from under him. Leora's throat bled when she spoke again. "Name who carried it." The tomb shook. King Ordan's voice sharpened. "Enough." Varric suddenly smiled through tears, because the dead king had reached the edge of confession and stopped. Liora felt it. The ravens felt it. Maelyra's crown felt it. The truth was there, but locked behind a command no dead king wanted to surrender. Liora looked at Varric. He had been the hand. Ordan had been the command. She stepped toward Varric, crown burning cold in her hands. Her voice was almost gone again. But not taken. Spent. There was a difference. "Finish it." Varric shook his head. The ravens lowered their beaks toward his shadow. Liora did not tell them to tear. She asked the memory. "Who carried the queen's death out of the room?" Varric's shadow convulsed. Something hidden inside it cracked open. A memory casket. Small. Black. The missing casket from the archive. It rose from his shadow and floated between him and the tomb. Caelan lifted his head. Varric sobbed once. The casket opened. Inside was not a confession. It was a command written in King Ordan's blood. "Let Varric wear my guilt until the boy is crowned." The crypt went silent. Then every raven turned toward Varric. Not as murderer alone. Oshvesel. Leora's blood went cold. Varric had stolen her voice. He had forged Caelan's guilt. He had helped bury Maelyra's death. But even he had been made into a casket for Ordan's command. King Ordan laughed from inside the tomb. "Every crown needs a man willing to become its sin." Varric looked up, broken. "I was loyal." Leora's voice came out as a rasp. "No." The ravens leaned closer. "You were useful." The word destroyed him more completely than cruelty would have. Caelan rose slowly. His grief had changed. Less wild now. More dangerous. He looked at the tomb of his father, then at Varric, then at Liora, whose voice had begun bleeding down her chin. "What do you need?" he asked. Liora looked at the black command written in blood, then at the ravens, then at the burned crown. "His ring," she whispered. Caelan went still. Every Veyr king was buried with a dragonbone signet, the seal of command. Without it, Ordan's blood law could not hold memory shut. Caelan turned to the tomb. For 1 second, the son in him hesitated. Then the king reached for the lid. King Ordan's voice roared, "Touch my grave and lose the throne I gave you." Caelan's answer came low. "You gave me a lie." He drove his sword beneath the tomb lid. Black fire erupted around him. The ravens screamed. Liora stepped forward, lifting the crown, though her throat burned raw. If Caelan was going to open his father's grave, she would not let him do it alone. The tomb lid cracked. Inside, King Ordan's dead hand opened. On one finger, the dragonbone signet burned with black command, and the ring turned toward Liora as if it recognized the voice it had failed to erase. The ring turned toward Liora as if it recognized the voice it had failed to erase. Caelan froze beside his father's tomb. King Ordan's dead hand still gripped the dragonbone signet. black command fire crawling over the ring like a living curse. Around them, ash ravens covered the crypt walls, their ember eyes fixed on Varric Thorn's pinned shadow. Liora stood with Queen Maelyra's burned crown in her hands. Her throat bled from speaking too much too soon, but her voice remained hers. King Orden's voice rolled from inside the tomb. The keeper should have stayed voiceless. The ravens screamed. Liora lifted her chin. She did not. The ring burned brighter, reaching for her. Caelan stepped forward, then stopped before he blocked her. Good. This truth had to pass through her, not around her. Liora looked at Varric. Name what he gave you. Varric shook his head. You do not know what it means to refuse a king. Leora's voice came rough. Yes, I do. The ravens pulled Varric's shadow flat against the crypt floor. A small black memory casket rose from inside it, sealed with King Orden's blood. Caelan went still. Varric whispered. He told me the kingdom would fracture if Maelyra's confession survived. Liora pressed the burned crown against the casket. Open it. Varric tried to resist. The ravens tightened their talons. The casket cracked. Inside burned one command, written in Orden's blood. Let Varric wear my guilt until the boy is crowned. Caelan's face went white. Varric broke. He promised my house would rule the archive forever, he whispered. He promised my name would stand beside the throne. Liora looked at the command, then at Varric. And where is your name now? No answer came. The casket opened fully. Black fire shot into Ordan's ring. The signet loosened on the dead king's finger. Caelan reached for it. The tomb screamed. Orden's voice thundered. Touch it, son, and inherit what you deny. Caelan stopped. Every raven watched him. Liora watched too. If Caelan took the ring as a son claiming power, Orden's command would pass into him. Slowly, Caelan lowered his sword. It should not answer me, he said. That mattered. Not forgiveness, but cost. The ring pulsed again, toward Liora. Not because she was royal, because her voice had been stolen to protect the truth. Because witness, not blood, was the key. Liora stepped to the tomb. Caelan did not stop her. Varric rasped. It will burn you. Liora looked at her blood-stained hand. They already tried. She reached into the tomb. Black command fire crawled over her fingers. Pain tore through her throat so sharply her vision blurred. The ravens opened their beaks. This time, they did not speak for her. They spoke with her. Liora closed her hand around the dragonbone signet and pulled it free. The command fire snapped. The tomb cracked from end to end. Caelan staggered, one hand over his chest as if something old had been torn loose. The false guilt. The planted memory. The locked door he had carried like a sin. Not erased. Unchained. He dropped to one knee. Liora turned toward him, ring burning in her palm. Caelan lifted his eyes. I sent you to the tower, he said. No excuse. No strategy. I did it because I feared Varric would cut your hands before the ravens answered. Leora's throat tightened. He continued, voice raw. But fear still used your body as a door. The ravens went still. Liora held his gaze. Yes. He bowed his head. The ring dimmed slightly. Not forgiveness. Witness. King Ordan's voice thinned inside the broken tomb. You free a boy's guilt and call it justice. But who will carry the kingdom's blame now? Liora looked at the ring, then at the crown, then at Varric. No one carries it alone anymore. The ravens beat their wings. Gold memory rose from the crypt floor. Names, not vision. Names of those blamed for Maelyra's death. A guard executed. A maid erased. A raven keeper silenced. A prince crowned over a lie. A queen turned into forbidden memory. Liora swayed. Caelan moved once, then stopped himself. What do you need? He asked. Liora looked toward the stair leading back to the palace. Open the upper crypt. Caelan Veyr. That was where kings were honored. Where Orden's public memory stood clean and holy. If they opened it, the whole court would see what lay beneath the polished grief. Caelan nodded once. Then we open it. Varric tried to crawl back. The ravens seized his shadow and dragged him after them. Not to kill him, to make him walk behind the truth. Liora climbed toward the upper crypt with the burned crown in one hand and Ordan's signet in the other. Caelan followed 3 steps behind her. Not beside her. Not yet. Above them, the palace bells began to ring by themselves, and every ash raven in Veyr flew toward King Orden's public tomb. The cry of the dragon egg cut through the upper crypt. Not loud, not fully alive, but old enough to make every raven fall silent. The black door inside Queen Maelyra's final memory opened wider, and gold flames spilled across the floor like light from a wound. Inside it, Liora saw a nursery beneath the palace. Not the prince's nursery. Deeper, hidden behind black stone and dragon bone locks. At the center of the chamber sat an egg. Small, black, veined with gold. A dragon egg wrapped in Queen Maelyra's blood-stained cloak. Caelan took one step toward the memory. His face had gone white. I never knew. Veyr laughed weakly from the floor, still clutching the wound where the feather had been pulled from his chest. That was the point. The ravens snapped their beaks toward him. He went silent. Liora's throat burned too badly for a long question. She looked at the burned crown in her hands, then at the gold memory door. What is it? Queen Maelyra's voice answered from the crown. The egg Ordan could not command. The crypt trembled. The hidden coffin beneath Orden's public tomb cracked again. Black fire bled from the seam. King Orden's dead voice returned, thinner now but still poisonous. It was not an heir. It was a threat. The dragon egg inside the memory pulsed once. Gold, then black, then gold again. Caelan's hands clenched. He buried it. No, Liora whispered. The words scraped blood from her throat. She looked at Veyr. The ravens followed her gaze. He made someone carry it. Veyr's face crumpled. There. Truth. The crown burned colder in Liora's hands. Caelan turned on him. Where's the egg? Veyr shook his head. Not where. Who? The whole crypt went still. Liora's stomach turned. The ravens spread their wings, ember eyes blazing. Veyr looked at the floor, voice broken. Orden ordered the egg's living memory sealed inside the ash ravens, but no raven could hold all of it. His eyes lifted toward Liora. So he used the keeper. Caelan looked at Liora. Horror entered his face slowly. Liora pressed one hand to her chest. The ache had always been there. A quiet heat beneath her silence. A place inside her where something sometimes cried when ravens passed overhead. She had thought it was fear. It had been memory. The egg cried again. This time, the sound came from Liora's own chest. She staggered. Caelan moved, then stopped before touching her. What do you need? He asked. The right question. At the wrong moment. Still, it mattered. Liora forced herself upright. Do not let him close it. Caelan turned toward Ordan's hidden coffin. Black fire was crawling over the memory door, trying to seal it shut. Caelan drove his sword into the crack of the coffin lid. The fire burst up his arms. He did not let go. Orden's voice thundered. You lost your mother because you were weak. You will lose her truth because you are still weak. Caelan's face twisted, but he held the blade down. No, he said. I lost her because you killed her. The coffin cracked wider. Liora stepped toward the memory door with the burned crown held against her chest. Every raven followed, not as soldiers, as witnesses. The dragon egg inside the memory pulsed harder. Queen Maelyra's voice came faintly. Keeper. Return what was hidden in you. Liora closed her eyes. Her voice had been taken. Her hands had nearly been taken. Her life had been used as a hiding place for a royal truth that no one had asked her to carry. Anger rose in her so hot it almost became a scream. The ravens waited. If she used that scream for revenge, they would answer it. If she used it for truth, they would carry it. She opened her eyes. Mine, she whispered. The crown flared. The ravens lifted. My voice is mine. The egg cried. My body is mine. Gold light opened under her ribs. And what was hidden in me without consent must answer me before it answers any crown. The memory door shuddered. Inside the hidden nursery, the egg split. Not hatching. Remembering. A tiny black gold dragon shape moved inside the shell. Not flesh yet, but living memory. It turned its head toward Liora, then toward Caelan, then away from both of them, as if refusing to belong to either. Liora understood. The egg was not a weapon. Not an heir to be claimed. Not a throne key. It was the queen's last protected life memory. And Orden had hidden it inside Liora's silence so no one could ever find it without hurting her first. Veyr began to sob. I only carried out the blood law. Liora turned toward him. Her throat bled as she spoke. No, you carried it out on children. The raven screamed his answer back at him. Varric lowered his head. The memory door widened. The gold dragonling inside the egg memory pressed one tiny claw against the shell. Queen Maelyra's final voice filled the crypt. My son, if this memory reaches you, do not crown grief. Do not command the keeper. Do not make my death another cage. Caelan bowed his head. Tears mixed with rain on his face. I hear you. The dragonling's shell cracked. Ordan's black fire surged one last time from the coffin. It struck toward the egg memory. Liora raised the burned crown. Caelan held the coffin open. The ravens descended together. Not attacking. Shielding. Their wings formed a black circle around the memory door, taking the black fire into their feathers and burning it into ash. Liora screamed. The pain tore through her throat, through the place where her voice had been hidden, through every raven that had kept it safe. But she stayed standing. The egg memory broke open. A small black gold dragonling made of light and memory unfolded inside the air above the crown. The crypt filled with warmth. Not crown fire. Queen fire. The dragonling opened its eyes and looked at Liora. Then it spoke in a voice no bigger than a spark. Keeper. Liora nearly broke. Caelan lowered his sword. The coffin slammed shut behind him, its black fire dead. King Ordan's voice vanished. Not defeated forever, but silenced from this memory. The dragonling turned toward Caelan next. It did not bow. It did not call him king. It only pressed its tiny head to the burned crown. Queen Maelyra's crown mended one broken curve. Caelan whispered, Mother. The queen's voice answered softly, Live without my murder on your throne. The words struck him harder than any accusation. He sank to one knee. Liora watched him. This did not forgive what he had done to her, but it freed him from the lie that had taught him to do it. Varric shook on the floor. The ravens dragged his shadow closer to the crown. Liora looked down at him. You will not die with this secret. His eyes widened. You will walk behind it. The ravens screamed once. Judgment accepted. The black gold memory dragonling lifted from the crown and flew toward the upper crypt doors. Every raven followed. Outside, the court waited in terror. Liora wiped blood from her mouth. Caelan stood behind her, 3 steps back. Not beside her. Not yet. The doors opened. The memory dragonling flew into the royal hall, carrying Queen Maelyra's final truth in its wings. And every noble who had bowed to Ordan's tomb saw the murdered queen's crown burn gold in a silent maid's hands. The memory dragonling flew into the royal hall before any noble could kneel. It was small, black gold, made of queen fire and remembered breath. Yet the entire dragon court stepped back as if a war beast had entered. Liora stood beneath the open crypt doors with Queen Maelyra's burned crown in her hands. Blood marked her lower lip. Her throat throbbed from every word she had forced back into the world. The ash ravens filled the rafters. They did not attack. They watched. That frightened the court more. Caelan stood 3 steps behind Liora. Sword lowered. Face pale. Eyes fixed on the crown that had once belonged to his mother. Varric Thorn stumbled behind them, dragged by his own shadow and surrounded by ravens. Alive. Ruined. Still necessary. The memory dragonling circled the hall once. Then it landed on the broken arm of King Ordan's public statue. The statue had always shown Ordan as a savior. One hand raised. One crown lifted. One dragon curled at his feet. The dragonling touched the statue with one tiny claw. The stone cracked. Not violently. Truthfully. Gold fire spread through the carved face, peeling away the noble expression until the court saw what lay beneath. The black command mark hidden in the stone. Queen Maelyra's voice filled the hall. My husband ordered my death preserved as my son's guilt. A noblewoman sobbed. A priest dropped his candle. The named council lords tried to move toward the side doors. The ravens descended and landed before them. Not biting. Blocking. Liora lifted the burned crown. Her voice came thin. Stay. The word cost her. Blood warmed her throat again. The ravens did not obey like soldiers. They answered the truth inside the command. The doors slammed shut. Caelan saw her sway. He moved 1 step. Stopped. May I? He asked. Liora did not look at him. No. He stopped completely. Good. Her pain was not an invitation. The memory dragonling opened its wings. Across the air above the court, Maelyra's final truth burned in golden letters. Caelan Veyr did not seal my door. The keeper's voice was stolen to hide my confession. King Orden wore my death as law. The court read every sentence. No one could unsee them. Varric fell to his knees. I carried the command. Liora turned toward him. Say all of it. His mouth trembled. The ravens leaned close. Varric's voice broke. I took the child's voice and placed it in the ravens before the knife could finish what Orden ordered. Liora's fingers tightened around the crown. So I should thank you? He flinched. No. That answer mattered. Not enough. But it mattered. Varric lowered his head. I saved the proof and destroyed the child. The ravens screamed once. The court went still. Liora's eyes burned. There it was. The shape of him. Not innocent. Not only monster. A man who preserved truth by ruining the one person who could carry it. She looked at Caelan. And you sent that child back into the tower. The hall froze. Caelan did not defend himself. I did. His voice carried. I knew the ravens were screaming her name. I knew Varric wanted her hands. I sent her into danger because I believed truth would protect her faster than I could. He looked at Liora. No crown. No command. No excuse. I was wrong. The ravens quieted. Liora held his gaze. The apology did not restore the years. It did not heal the wrist bruises. It did not make the tower door open before the fear. But it did not hide. That was the first useful thing he had given her. Queen Maelyra's crown pulsed in Liora's hands. The memory dragonling lifted its head toward Caelan, not bowing, asking. The court waited for him to claim it. The queen's last memory. The dragonling born from the hidden egg. A symbol strong enough to rebuild his rule in one breath. Caelan looked at it. Then at Liora. Then at the ravens. No, he said. The word moved through the hall. This memory does not belong to my crown. A murmureuse. Caelan turned toward the nobles. It belongs to the truth my crown buried. The memory dragonling's gold eyes brightened. Liora's throat tightened. He continued, voice rough but steady. By royal law, Ash, raven testimony has been forbidden since my mother's death. Varric closed his eyes. Caelan lifted his sword. For one instant, Liora feared he would use it on Varric. Instead, he drove the blade through the black marble step beneath Orden's statue. The stone split. I break that law. The ravens erupted into wings. Every sealed raven window in the hall cracked open at once. Storm air rushed in. Ash feathers flew. Hidden memory caskets buried inside the walls began to fall from their niches, one after another, striking the floor with hollow thuds. Not one. Dozens. The court stared. Liora stared too. Varric whispered. No. Caelan's face went cold. How many? Varric did not answer. The ravens answered for him. They flew to the caskets and stood on them like judges. Queen Maelyra's voice came from the burned crown. Mine was not the only memory sealed. Liora's voice nearly failed. Who else? The largest ash raven landed before her. Its ember eyes softened. Then it opened its beak. A child's voice came out. Not Lyra's. Another child. Keeper. More ravens landed. More voices followed. Servants. Queens. Prisoners. Soldiers. People whose final truths had been locked inside birds and then forbidden from testimony. Liora's knees nearly buckled. The ravens had not held only her voice. They had held a kingdom's buried last words. Caelan looked at the caskets horrified. Then at the court. All sealed memory caskets will be opened. A council lord shouted. That will destroy the royal record. Liora turned toward him, burned crown glowing in her hands. No, she whispered. The word hurt. But it held. It will destroy the lie. The memory dragonling flew from Orden's statue and landed on Liora's shoulder. The ash ravens bowed their heads. Not to a queen. Not to a servant. To the keeper. Then every sealed casket on the floor opened at once. Gold memory flooded the royal hall. And from somewhere deep beneath the palace, the ash raven tower answered with one final scream. Not warning. The ash raven tower screamed beneath the palace. Not above. Beneath. The royal hall shook as every open memory casket spilled gold light across the black marble floor. Ravens filled the rafters, the windows, the broken statue of King Orden, and every beam above the trembling court. Voices rose from the caskets. Not all at once. Onebiwan, a soldier naming the captain who sent him to die under a false banner. A servant naming the lord who buried her child's fever report. A prisoner naming the priest who erased his final confession. A queen naming the hand that changed her last decree. The court listened because the ravens would not let them do anything else. Liora stood in the center of it, Queen Maelyra's burned crown in her hands, the small black gold memory dragonling perched on her shoulder. Her throat bled with every breath. She had not spoken for years, and now every truth in Veyr seemed to want a path through her. The largest raven landed before her. Its ember eyes held a warning. Not command. Warning. If she tried to carry all the voices herself, her voice would break again. This time not stolen. Spent. Caelan saw the blood on her mouth. He stepped forward, then stopped. "What do you need?" he asked. Liora looked at the caskets, then at the ravens, then at the nobles shrinking beneath the weight of their own histories. "My voice is not the court." Caelan went still. "Good." He heard the law inside it. Liora lifted the burned crown. Her voice came rough and thin. Each memory speaks for itself. The ravens screamed once. The gold lights separated. No longer trying to flood Liora's throat, the memories rose above their own caskets and formed burning names in the air. The hall filled with testimony, but Liora did not have to bleed for every word. Varric Thorn, still on his knees, stared at the opened caskets in horror. "You cannot let them all speak," he rasped. "The kingdom will tear itself apart." Liora looked at him. "No." Her voice hurt. She kept it short. "The kingdom was already torn. You hid the wound." The ravens beat their wings. The floor cracked beneath Ordan's statue. Not from the caskets. From below. A black stair opened under the royal hall, leading down toward the buried base of the ash raven tower. Cold air rose from it. Ash. Feathers. Old chains. A voice came from the darkness. Many voices braided together. "Keeper." Liora's hand tightened around the crown. The memory dragonling pressed its tiny claws into her shoulder. Caelan looked at the stair. "What is down there?" Varric began to shake. The answer came from Queen Maelyra's crown. The first nest. Every raven in the hall bowed its head, even the ones holding Varric's shadow. Liora understood before anyone explained. The ash raven tower did not begin as a prison. It had been made into one. The first nest was where royal memories were originally kept before kings turned witness into punishment. Caelan's face hardened. "Then we open it." Liora turned to him. "No." He stopped. She swallowed blood. "You do not open the keeper's nest." The words were barely louder than breath. The ravens heard. The court heard. Caelan heard most of all. He lowered his head once. "Then I witness." That answer mattered. Not enough for forgiveness. Enough for the next step. Liora walked toward the black stair. The ravens parted. Varric's shadow stretched after her, dragged by dozens of beaks. He cried out, "No! Do not take me down there." Liora looked back. "You made yourself the lock." The words broke what remained of his pride. Caelan followed 3 steps behind her. The court tried to follow, too. The ravens blocked them. Only Liora, Caelan, Varric, the memory dragonling, and the ravens descended. At the bottom of the stair was a circular chamber made of burned white stone. Hundreds of old raven nests lined the walls. In each nest rested a feather, a memory shard, or a small object no larger than a child's hand. But the center of the chamber was empty. No throne, no coffin, no crown, only a stone basin filled with ash. The first nest. Liora stepped toward it. Her crown grew warm. The basin answered. Ash lifted into the air and formed the shape of a woman with no face. A keeper before Liora. Maybe many keepers. Their voices spoke together. "Why have you come?" Liora's throat could barely manage sound. "Still," she answered, "to return what was made into punishment." The faceless keeper turned toward Caelan. "And the king?" Caelan did not lift his head. "To witness what my crown forbade." The ash shape turned toward Varric. "And the lock?" Varric sobbed. The ravens dragged his shadow to the basin. The ash touched it. Every sealed command Varric had carried began to burn across his shadow. Not only Maelyra's, others. Dozens. Generations of royal memory turned into law. then turned into silence. The faceless keeper spoke. The ravens were made to hold truth until the living were brave enough to hear it. Liora looked at the chain nest. And the tower? Kings made it hunger. The chamber trembled. Above, the tower screamed again. The ravens became restless, wings beating against the walls. The hunger in the tower was waking. Not truth. Punishment. Years of prisoners fed into it. Years of memories sealed. Years of ravens forced to eat what courts refused to hear. If the first nest opened wrong, every raven in Veyr might turn from witness into vengeance. Liora felt it. The pull, the temptation. Let the ravens rease. Let them tear every liar open. Let every noble feel a beak where truth had been buried. She closed her eyes, then opened them. No blood first, she whispered. The first keeper's ash face tilted. Liora placed Queen Maelyra's burned crown into the basin. Then she placed Orden's signet beside it. Queen's memory, King's command, witness and wound. Together, let the ravens carry truth, Liora said. Not hunger. The chamber went silent. Veyr screamed as the last command burned out of his shadow. The tower above stopped screaming. One by one, the nests opened. Feathers lifted. Memory shards rose. Lost last words flew upward through the stair like sparks returning to the sky. The ravens followed, not as a storm of punishment, as witnesses released from a cage. Caelan looked at Liora. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. I will break the law that made raven testimony forbidden. Liora looked at him. Not later. He nodded once. Now. He climbed back to the royal hall and stood before the court with no crown, no sword lifted, and no lie left to hide behind. The Ash Raven law is broken, he said. From this hour, Raven memory stands before royal record. The court erupted. Caelan's voice cut through it. And every record that contradicts living witness will be reopened. The ravens filled the hall with gold fire. Veyr collapsed at Liora's feet below, his shadow emptied of commands. The first keeper's ash shape leaned close to Liora. One memory remains in you. Liora went still. The memory dragonling on her shoulder curled closer. The keeper's voice softened. Not the queen's, not the king's. Liora pressed one shaking hand to her throat, the place where her voice had once vanished. The ash basin darkened. Inside it appeared a tiny black feather tipped in gold. The feather Queen Maelyra had pressed into her hand as a child. The first keeper whispered, "Your own." The first keeper's whisper moved through the ash basin. Liora stared at the tiny black feather tipped in gold. The feather Queen Maelyra had pressed into her hand when she was a child. The feather she had forgotten because forgetting was how pain survived inside her. Her throat tightened. Not from stolen silence this time. From fear. Queen Maelyra's memory had been terrible. Caelan's false guilt had been terrible. Veyric's crimes had been terrible. But this was hers. No queen to speak beside her. No raven to carry it first. No crown to soften the wound. The memory dragonling on her shoulder curled closer, warm and trembling. Above them, the royal hall thundered with ravens and open testimony. But down in the first nest chamber, everything became still. Caelan stood at the stair entrance, 3 steps away, close enough to witness, far enough not to enter what was not his. Good. He had learned the shape of distance. Liora reached into the ash basin. The gold-tipped feather rose into her palm. The moment she touched it, the chamber vanished. She was small again, hidden beneath a black cloak in Queen Maelyra's arms. The ash raven tower shook around them. Ravens screamed from every beam. Veyric's younger face stood at the doorway with a silver blade, and King Ordan's command burned in the air behind him like a sealed door. Queen Maelyra knelt before Liora. Blood marked the queen's sleeve. Her hands were warm. "Little keeper," Maelyra whispered. "They are coming for what you heard." Liora remembered now. She had heard Ordan's command. She had heard Veyr agree. She had heard the queen's final confession before anyone else. That was why they needed her voice. Not because she was useless, because she was witness. Veyr lunged. Maelyra pressed the gold-tipped feather into Liora's hand. "Keep what they steal." Then the ravens descended, not attacking Liora, protecting what they could. 100 black beaks opened. Her own voice tore from her throat. The pain was white, endless, then silence. The memory broke. Liora collapsed beside the ash basin, gasping, blood on her lips. Her voice was still there. Rav. Shaking. Hers. Caelan stepped forward once. Stopped. What do you need? He asked. Liora closed her fingers around the feather. To finish speaking. He bowed his head and stayed where he was. Liora stood slowly. The first keeper's ash shape watched her. The ravens bowed their heads from the chamber walls. Liora lifted the feather. My voice was not taken because I was weak, she said. The words hurt. She kept going. It was taken because I heard the crown's first lie. The ash basin flared gold. Above, in the royal hall, every raven repeated the sentence in its own voice. The court heard. The servants heard. The nobles heard. Veyr heard from where he lay emptied beside the stairs. Liora climbed back to the royal hall. Each step burned her throat. But she did not stop. When she entered, every memory casket had opened. Gold names hung in the air. Ravens filled the broken windows. Queen Maelyra's burned crown glowed in Liora's hand, no longer cold, no longer hidden. Caelan stood before the court without a crown. When Liora appeared, he turned. The court waited for him to name her Keeper, Savior, Queen, Mate, something useful. Caelan did not. He lowered his head. She will speak for herself. The words settled over the hall. Liora looked at him. Not forgiven, but seen. That was different. She stepped past him and faced the court. I am Liora Sable, she said, voice trembling but clear. Ash Raven Keeper. My voice was stolen, hidden, and returned. It does not belong to the throne. The ravens screamed once. Witness. Liora turned toward Veyr. He looked smaller now, without command inside him. Veyr Thorn, she said. You will not die with the memories you stole. His eyes filled with terror. You will live. Every dawn, you will open one sealed record and speak the name inside it before the court, the servants, and the ravens. If you lie, the ravens will answer. If you stay silent, your shadow will speak. Veyr bowed his head to the floor. Death would have been easier. The ravens accepted. Caelan faced the nobles. From this day, Ash, Raven testimony stands above royal record. No servant, prisoner, widow, child, or keeper will be sent to the Raven Tower as punishment again. A council lord whispered. Then what is the tower? Liora looked toward the western windows, where the Ash Raven Tower rose black against the clearing storm. Her answer came softly. A place for truth until the living are brave enough to hear it. Queen Maelyra's crown pulsed one final time. The memory dragonling lifted from Liora's shoulder and flew to Caelan. It did not bow. It touched his chest once. Caelan closed his eyes. His mother's voice filled the hall, gentler now. My son, do not build another crown from grief. Caelan's face broke. I won't, he whispered. Then the dragonling returned to Liora and curled around the burned crown like a living flame. The crown did not mend fully. It stayed burned. A truth, not a decoration. Caelan came no closer than 3 steps. I will not ask forgiveness tonight, he said. Good. He accepted it. I sent you into the tower. Yes. I called your danger strategy. Yes. His voice roughened. I will spend the rest of my reign opening the doors my fear kept closed. Liora studied him. The man who had sent her to the ravens. The boy who had been taught to carry a murder that was not his. The king who had finally stopped reaching for truth as if it belonged to him. That is where you start, she said. Dawn broke over Veyr. The storm thinned. Ash ravens poured from the palace windows into the pale sky, not as cursed executioners, not as royal punishment, but as keepers of voices returned. Below, servants stepped into the courtyard and looked up without lowering their eyes. The Ash Raven Tower no longer looked like a mouth. It looked like a watchtower. Liora stood at the western balcony with Queen Maelyra's burned crown in her hands, the memory dragonling at her shoulder, and hundreds of ravens circling above her like black stars. Her voice was not smooth. It was not healed. It was not untouched. But when she spoke her own name, every raven in Veyr carried it into the dawn. Liora Sable. Caelan stood behind her, 3 steps away, waiting, not claiming. And for the first time since childhood, Liora did not need her hands to prove she existed. Her voice did.